Hi there, it's Julie Creffield from the Fat Girl's Guide to Running. I'm excited to be here sharing my journey so far. And my topic this evening is what marathon training has taught me about life, and also a little bit about how it's changed my drinking habits. So I'm hoping that some people are going to join live. I'm not sure if I can see that information, but I'm assuming there will be some live people and that people will catch it in the replay. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to join. I've not done any running this weekend. I'm a single parent. I've got a 4-year-old called Rose, and it was my weekend to have her. So we've had a busy weekend. We went to see the lights up at Oxford Street, and today we've had a day at home doing arts and crafts and stuff like that. So yeah, it's nice to be using my brain and thinking about work, which is a bit sad for a Sunday night, but there we go. So I'm going to get started. I can see we do have some people joining us. So hello, I'm not just talking to myself. And I know this Facebook Live is a little bit later than the ones you normally do. And again, that's because I had to get my daughter to sleep. So I'm hoping that I will be able to keep it exciting enough for you not to nod off. So let me introduce myself properly. My name's Julie Creffield, and I am the founder and CEO of a company called Too Fat to Run, which kind of developed out of a blog that I started writing. So I kind of got into running about 10 years ago, kind of very sporadically, and I took part in a fun run that was kind of being organised through work. And I'd never done any running before, and I didn't do any training for the race, and I just thought, oh, you know, I'm young, I'll be fine. And I was quite overweight at the time. I led quite a sedentary life, had kind of quite an active social life, was out drinking and raving most weekends. And, you know, I just thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And I did this race, and I was just shocked at how unhealthy I was and how difficult this race was. And some kids in the park that the race was taking place in shouted, "Run, fatty, run," which kind of really knocked my confidence, actually, because I think I was a bit in denial at how big I was and how unhealthy I was, and how difficult running that 3K was. So it was a bit of a wake-up call. And the other thing was that I live in East London, and at that time London were bidding for the Olympic Games, for the London 2012 Games, and it was kind of part of what I was doing, working for a local authority, and I felt a bit like a hypocrite, like, you know, promoting healthy living, and I wasn't really doing that. So I made a commitment. I said if London gets the Games, I would run the marathon in 2012. And all of my colleagues thought that was hilarious because, you know, I was hugely overweight, couldn't run to the top of my road, was known for my drinking and my partying, and not, you know, not at all for any kind of clean living or kind of exercise. But kind of all of that changed. You know, I committed to running this marathon. I wasn't sure how I was going to train for it. I didn't know any other runners. I don't come from a sporting background, and I never seemed to see any runners, so I just didn't think they existed. And I definitely didn't see any runners that looked like me. And this was kind of quite significant, really, because I ran probably for about 4 or 5 years pretty much by myself. I mean, I did the occasional race and things like that, but I never had any training partners, and I felt quite lonely. I didn't have anybody to ask questions. Running magazines didn't really speak to me. There wasn't the kind of online communities that we have now. And I think that was playing on my mind, you know, and I was worried about how I would train for this marathon, you know, pretty much doing it by myself. And a few years in to my training, you know, and actually I couldn't really call it training, it was very sporadic. I took part in a 10K race in Victoria Park in East London. And I came last, and I was so slow that by the time I got to the finish line wasn't there, and neither was anybody else. They'd all packed up and gone home. And I went through a range of emotions that day. At first I was embarrassed, hugely embarrassed. I cried on the way home. I was angry that the race organisers had done that to me, because they had, I believe, a kind of duty of care to look after everybody that had entered. And then by the time I got home, I was a bit like, oh, that is quite a funny story. And that evening, after I'd had a bath and kind of something to eat, I sat down and I started a blog. So it was an anonymous blog. It didn't have my photo or my name or anything like that. And it was called The Fat Girl's Guide to Running. And for a number of years, it was just about my experiences of running in a larger body. And it was never supposed to be a business. It was never supposed to be a movement. It was just like an online diary. And I was surprised that it kind of got all these followers, you know, from all around the world, and women were emailing me saying, oh my God, I'm so thankful for your blog. I thought I was the only fat runner out there. Now I feel like I can, you know, achieve stuff. I can do races. I can be seen. I can be more visible. And it kind of grew from there. And then in 2012, just after the Olympics, and I had run my marathon by this point, I was made redundant. So the day after the opening ceremony, I was made redundant, and it made me kind of analyse everything really, because I was now out of work, and I was also 7 months pregnant with my daughter. And, you know, a few months after she was born, the blog was still getting lots of kind of followers, lots of kind of profile, and I decided to see if I could turn it into a business, and I've been doing it full time ever since. I now have a massive kind of online community. I've got 50,000 followers on social media, and I coach women from across the world on all kind of levels, really, from beginner programs to improving their speed. And I have an online running club, and we do kind of retreats and things like that. So running has become my life, really. But when I look back to kind of where I was when I first started, you know, as I said, I was, you know, hugely overweight, really inactive, which I think was the more important thing. I mean, I've always been a big girl. I've never really worried about how I look. So, you know, my weight has never been about, oh my God, I've got to be smaller to look better. I've always been quite confident, and, you know, I'm a real kind of believer in the kind of body positive movement. I don't think we should have to be defined by our size. But for me, I felt unhealthy. I was in my mid-20s and just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. And I think that wasn't because of my size. I think it was because of my lifestyle. I was eating crap. I was drinking far too much. I was not getting sleep at the weekend because I was out raving. And actually, I was very unhappy. When I look back, I might have felt like, you know, I was living the life and going on all these holidays with all my friends. I wasn't that happy. And I had a bout of depression, and that kind of knocked me for six, really. And I think exercise really helped me to get out of that. And I think, you know, once I started to think about my training as training and not just this little hobby I did, that's when I started to kind of really change my habits, or at least look at them. And, you know, I can remember in the early days, you know, still going out, you know, drinking the night before a big race, and then having a horrific race, not enjoying it, and thinking, God, why did I do that? And I think over time, it became a lot easier to kind of drop the drinking because it was affecting my training, you know, and it was a question of, what do I want more? Do I want to train this weekend, or do I want to go out? And it's interesting because marathon running is kind of, it's a solo sport, and often it's seen as quite a selfish, self-indulgent sport, but everyone has an opinion on it. So a lot of people get quite bored by people talking about marathon training, and you know, and they'll say things like, oh, come on, come out, you're always running, that's all you ever do. But when you've got a goal which is as big as a marathon, you know, and you have a real sense of why, and people say to me, you know, how do I get the motivation to run a marathon? And I think you have to have a reason why. You don't just do it because you've, you know, gone up distances and you think, oh, the marathon is the next thing. I think you have to have a real clear sense of why. So it might be about improving your health. It might be about raising money for a specific cause. You know, there are so many kind of personal reasons that people run marathons. For a lot of my women who I coach, it's about proving people wrong, people that say they can't do certain things. And often it's about proving something to themselves. And when I look back to who I was before running my first marathon, I like to think I was confident, but actually I wasn't. I was very doubting of myself. I didn't have much self-belief. And I think when you train for a marathon, you realise how capable you are to put your mind to anything. I mean, you know, training for a 10K, a 5K, a half marathon, yes, they all take a certain amount of changing your habits and thinking differently. But that step from half marathon to full marathon, I don't think people truly understand how far 26.2 miles are. And when you get to that start line, the fear, there is nothing like it in the world, because particularly in a bigger body, you're like, people die running marathons, and you have to have that conversation with yourself, and you have no idea. You would, even in training, you would never have gone up to 26 miles, and your last memory would have been your biggest run, and you'd know how horrific that was. So you do learn a lot about yourself during that process, both in terms of the training, but also the race. And during the race, you're like a superhero, particularly with the big city marathons. So I've done London twice and I've done Brighton once. The crowds are just phenomenal. And, you put your name on your shirt and people call your name like their life depends on it. And I can remember the very first marathon I did, I was probably in the best shape of my life. And, I run such a strong first half. I run far faster than I thought I might. And my partner at the time kept missing me because I was faster than the times that I told him. And I got to Tower Bridge, which is a big key moment. And I thought, gosh, I haven't stopped. I haven't started walking. I'm not in any pain. This is easy. And I got to mile 16. I was still running. And, okay, it got a little bit more difficult after that. But, I run 90% of that marathon. And I can remember in the last few miles, the weather had changed and it started raining. And there was still a long embankment. All of these people, with rain mats and umbrellas still cheering on the runners. And I can remember getting quite choked up with this couple saying, Julie, you're amazing. You're incredible. What you're doing is phenomenal. And I thought, God, you don't even know me. And I got really choked up that they were encouraging me. And I realised at that moment what I had achieved. And it was something quite spectacular. And, okay, it might appear on social media that everyone's running marathons, but actually it's less than 1% of the world's population that will ever run a marathon. And when you think about that, I think, running a marathon makes you quite visible in the world. It forces you to kind of say, that's the kind of person that I am. And it forces you to up your game in kind of other areas of your life, because you think, gosh, if I can do that, kind of what else can I do? So I'm just starting to see some comments through. I was a bit worried because I couldn't see them. So yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in, and I'll leave a bit of time at the end, definitely to kind of answer questions. But as I said, I've run 3 full marathons. They're not my favourite distance, if I'm being honest, because they do overtake your life. You have to commit to it 100%. And I'm a single parent. I'm running a business. I've got a lot of competing priorities. So the training part of a marathon is quite an undertaking. In saying that, I did an ultra marathon this year, which was 42 miles in 24 hours. But it's a slightly different beast because you do a lot of walking within the race and stuff like that. But I have been thinking a lot about marathons recently, even though I haven't run one for a couple of years, because I've just written a new book. So this is my book here. It's called The Fat Girl's Guide to Marathon Running. And I decided to write this book about 2 months ago. It was in October, because October is the time where people find out if they have a marathon place for the London Marathon. So it's a ballot. People put their names down in kind of April, and then they have all this waiting time, and everyone finds out in October. And there's a lot of disappointed people and a lot of kind of debate, about whether the system is fair and all of that. So there was all this stuff on social media. And I just thought to myself, why have I never written a book on marathon running? Because I've written lots of other books. So here are a selection of my other books. I've got books about every other aspect of running and not marathon running, although I do mention a little bit in my other books. So it was October. And I thought, I've never written a book about marathon training. And lots of women were saying, oh, I've just got a place for April. I'm really worried. Can you give me some advice? And I was like, well, I can't answer everybody's questions personally, but what I can do is write a book. But I knew that I had to write the book quickly, because if I'd left it to December to launch it, or January, it's too late, because you've got to get your core training in during October and November. So I set myself the challenge of writing a book in 30 days. It actually took me 19 days to write the book. And what was really interesting about that, it normally takes me a lot longer to write my books, is because I've got so much kind of knowledge and information up here, because I've also been training women to run their first marathon, the stuff just came from my head onto the page so easily. And I was just like, blah, blah, blah. And the most challenging thing was making myself sit at the computer to actually do it. So I wrote the book in 19 days. I put it up on Amazon before it was even finished, and the book went to #1 in the running charts. I've got loads of 5-star reviews. Women are absolutely loving the book, because I think there are 2 types of marathon running books on the market. There are kind kind of technical how to run a marathon, how to train a marathon books, which are full of jargon and are quite prescriptive and assume that you can run quite fast. And then the other type of marathon book are kind of, this is how I did it kind of books. So they're more kind of stories of people that have overcome adversity to run a marathon, and they're full of kind of anecdotes and stuff like that. Mine is a combination of both. So it's very humorous. It's got a lot of my own funny stories in it, and lots of stories that I've collected and collated from the women that I train. But also it's got some real hard hitting, this is how you do it, this is how you don't do it advice. And the reviews are saying that that balance is what women are enjoying. So marathon training is really kind of in my head at the moment, and the process of writing that book made me look back at how marathon training has changed my life. And I am now considered one of the world's leading experts on plus size running, which is a weird thing to say about myself, but it's the truth. I recently got named in a list of 70 of the world's influencers in running, in Runners World magazine, alongside some of the best athletes in the world and running coaches and running experts. And to think that I'm not the best runner in the world, gosh, it takes me 6-7 hours to run a marathon. And, I've done all of my marathons in a plus size body. But I think, what I've learned about myself and how other people are inspired by my journey is that thing of kind of accepting who you are and not using the excuse of, I'll run a marathon when I've lost weight, or I'll run a marathon when, I've got time, or, I think we often as human beings underestimate what we can do. And we tell ourselves a lot of kind of bullshit stories, and other people like to tell us those stories too. And I can remember, telling my mum I was going to run a marathon, and she was like, oh, and telling my granddad, and everyone was like, oh, that's really dangerous, you shouldn't do it. And, a lot of my women talk about kind of the underwhelm that a lot of their family members express, or, when somebody's trained really hard for a marathon and they'll run it in like 5 hours, which I think is a really good time. And a member of their family will go, what did you do? Walk it. So there's a lot of kind of negativity that can surround you. And I think often this is because running a marathon is an extraordinary thing to do. And when you do an extraordinary thing in your life, it often holds a mirror up to other people, and it triggers them and makes them reflect on themselves. And they might not be doing it consciously. Sometimes it's very subtle, and they think, I've had people, I just kind of know, I get a vibe from them where they're thinking, who the hell does she think she is? And, does she think she's special because she runs all these marathons? So a lot of the time you have to deal with, you think that people are going to want to support you and people are going to think you're incredible. And often women talk about doing these kind of things for validation, and often it doesn't come. But what does happen is you realize that actually this isn't about other people, this is about me, and, setting myself a goal and going for it. Now, I do work as a life coach now, so I help women outside of the running world. So I'd been doing this online running club for a while, for a number of years, about 3 or 4 years. And a lot of what we were talking about in that group wasn't about running anymore. It was about, relationships, and it was about time management and goal setting. And I realized that actually a lot of women were looking to me to coach them in other areas of their life. So I set up an online coaching program called Living a Bigger Life, because when I think about what I've done, yes, running is what I'm known for. You Google fat runner and I come up really high in the rankings. And if you say my name, a lot of people go, oh, that's that, that fat woman who runs marathons. But actually, the running is just a vehicle. So, what I'm really passionate about is helping women to live bigger versions of their life, and, across all areas of their lives, health being one of them. But, I'm really interested in how women kind of grow businesses, or, live a life filled with the passion that they have, and so that kind of program's really helping me to help other women, to think bigger about their lives. And I think, part of that, and I've made a few notes here about kind of the similarities between, if you're watching this and thinking, I never want to run a marathon, how can I make this useful for you in other aspects? And I think that kind of living a bigger life strap line helps people to think, you know, am I playing small? Am I making excuses? Am I just settling in life? You know, and lots of women say to me, oh, you know, I'm reasonably happy, you know, I'm just plodding along, you know, but there's this kind of underlying thing where they kind of want something more. So I put together just a quick list of things that I think have helped me to live a bigger life over the last few years. I think saying yes to things is major. I have had some incredible opportunities come up over the last few years, particularly since becoming a blogger. I mean, the opportunities that come your way are phenomenal. I can remember getting a phone call from a PR company saying, we're putting a team together to do the Geneva Half Marathon. Would you like to come? And I was like, oh, that sounds exciting. And then when I found out who else was doing it, there was a lady called Susie Chan who just set the world record for running on a treadmill. There was, you know, the editor of Men's Health, you know, so there was, I think there was 5 or 6 of us. Everybody else, bar me, were these kind of huge running health celebrities, and then there was kind of little old me or kind of big old me. So their report, the Geneva Half Marathon, was very different to mine. Mine was all about how rubbish I was and how slow I was, but also how beautiful it was in Switzerland. That opportunity would never have come to me if I hadn't become a blogger. And also 5 years ago, I probably would have been too scared and too self-conscious to say yes to something like that, to be so visible. And it was really funny in that race. I'm used to being somewhere near the back, but literally within the first 10 seconds of this race, I had the sweeper van behind me going beep, beep, beep. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to run 13 miles being the last runner. So it really kind of made me confront a lot of things. And, you know, getting opportunities to come and do webinars like this where I just share my story. You know, I would never have done this 5 years ago. You know, I had a fear of public speaking, and, you know, this journey has led me to all kinds of crazy things. Last year, I did stand-up comedy, you know, and told jokes about how similar I was to Paula Radcliffe and stuff like that. So I think saying yes in life, I think we should all do it a little bit more. Excuse me. I think the other aspect which I help women to think about, is I get women to think about, you know, if you want new stuff in your life, if you want new, exciting, big stuff in your life, sometimes you have to get rid of the annoying, toxic, you know, crap that kind of fills your life. So when you're marathon training, you do have to sacrifice going out with your mates. You do have to sacrifice watching TV. You know, there's certain things you have to give up. You know, when marathon training, my advice is always to give up alcohol, because it's not helping, you know, it's not serving you, or you have to be mindful about it and kind of moderate. But, you know, you do have to declutter the crap from your life to allow the better stuff in. And sometimes that includes people as well. Sometimes you have to get rid of the toxic people who can't see where you're heading or where your goals are. Being visible, I've spoken about that. You know, it's really difficult to run a marathon without being visible. Often you have to fundraise, often you have to ask for support, you know, you're likely to be photographed, you know, you have to show up. You have to show up and say, this is me and this is what I'm all about. And sometimes that can be difficult. And I think setting yourself goals. So I have a kind of a system called, you know, what do I call them? Big, fat, stupid goals. Because, you know, you've got SMART goals, but actually SMART goals often, the process of thinking through your SMART goals gives you so many kind of get out clauses or opportunities for overwhelm or fear that you never get to that big thing that you really want. Because if I think about it, running a marathon for me was just not a SMART goal. I couldn't do that within those SMART parameters. It wasn't realistic. You know, most people would train for a marathon in a certain amount of time and build up to it gradually. I didn't have that time. I had to just go for that goal and just, you know, trust that it would work. And I think quite often we talk about, and there's, you know, there's two schools of thought here. We talk about tiny incremental changes and, you know, changing one habit at a time and doing things gradually. But often as you do those things gradually, other kind of bad habits gradually come in as well. And so I'm a big believer of, right, it's kind of all or nothing and just go for it, particularly if it's a big dream of yours. And I have women say, oh, you know, I'm setting myself the goal of running a marathon by 2020. And I'm like, well, what if you have a car crash before then? Or what if you get promoted at work and things change? Or what if you get an injury? You know, and I think if you're in reasonably good health, do it now. So that's always my advice, is kind of do it now. What else? And I think ultimately, and I'll leave on this one because then you can kind of ask me some questions and stuff. But ultimately, I think what living a bigger life is about, and it feels weird to say this kind of because it's a little bit out of context, but I think it's about appreciating yourself for who you are. And it's not about changing. So it's not about becoming this brand new shiny person. If anything, it's about becoming a clearer version of who you are. So the bits about yourself that are core to you, you know, and getting rid of all of the stuff that makes you fake, or the stuff that where you're aspiring to be like somebody who isn't you. So I think, you know, training for a marathon, you know, developing a business, you know, these big things that kind of transform your life. It's about the more you can be yourself, the more successful you're going to be in that. So when you're pulling together a training plan, being honest about the fact that, you know, if you like a drink on a Friday night, then you're not going to get up and do a run on a Saturday, and that's fine. Just schedule it in. And the same with a business plan. If you know you are never going to do a Facebook Live like this, don't put it in your business plan. Don't build a business around that. Whereas, you know, even though I've not always been a fan of public speaking, I am a talker, I'm a storyteller, I love telling stories. So that aspect has really helped me to grow my brand. I just tell stories. I just tell the story of how I came last in this marathon, and the time I met Paula Radcliffe, and the time, you know, and people kind of resonate with that, you know. But I don't feel the need to put on a posh accent or to, you know, deviate from, you know, where I've come from. And I think that is perhaps where the success comes from in terms of whatever your goal is. I think you've just really kind of got to look within and kind of just learn to love yourself, I think, which is, I don't know, it's more difficult for some of us than others, but I think it's not something that is all or nothing. It's something that you can kind of grow to do. So I'm just going to kind of catch up on the questions and comments here. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm really happy to take them. So Victoria talks about kind of motivation. It is really hard to be motivated, particularly in the winter. We find a real kind of drop in participation during the winter, and we're just launching a Christmas challenge actually to kind of get over that. So I've set myself the goal of running 100 miles in December. I don't run a lot of miles in the winter because I'm not, you know, if I'm not marathon training, there's no real reason. So having a race, so I've got a race in February, having you know, having people to keep you accountable. So, you know, the Club Soda community helps people to be accountable. It helps people to kind of share their experiences, to help and support other people. And my training programs all have little closed Facebook groups where, you know, people post, oh, I really can't be bothered to go out tonight. And somebody else will go, oh, go on, you know, I'll go if you go. So that kind of peer support really, really helps. But yeah, having a goal, having a reason to run, you know, even if your reason is, I know I'm going to feel better when I get back. You know, I often go out for a run when I'm really stressed or if someone's really pissed me off. That is my reason. My reason is I know I'm going to feel better when I get back. Wondering if 57 is too old to train for a marathon? Absolutely not. So in my online running club, my the average age, well, I don't know statistically, but the average age is around 55, I think. Most of my women are aged 35 to 65. Lots of women training for marathons in their 50s and 60s. And the thing with marathon training, marathons is they have changed over the years. So, you know, in the 80s, you know, it was all about men in short shorts, and it was all about athletics clubs, and everyone was running fast. And then you had the fun runners, you know, everybody in costume raising money for charity. And I think it's evolved even from then. So I trained, I think it was 11 ladies. No, I think it was more than that. I can't remember the number, but I trained a bunch of women last year to run the London Marathon, and they finished in times ranging from 4 hours 35 to around 8 hours. And there are lots of women that do a technique called Jeffing, which is named after a man called Jeff Galloway, an American running coach who advocates for run walking. So you do like 4 minutes running, 1 minute walk, 4 minutes running, 1 minute walk, or you can change the ratio. So there are lots of people that, you know, are never going to run a sub 3 hour marathon, me included. But I think they are much more accessible to people that are just wanting to have that experience. But I would say don't do it alone. Find a running club locally or an online one like mine, because you'll have lots of questions and you'll have the need to feel like you're not this weird, strange person with this goal that is completely unachievable, you know. And with marathon training, and there was a chapter in my book all about it, around how you train your mind in the same way that you train your body, because you have months and months and months of getting your body ready for the marathon, but you also have to train your mind. You have to get your mind ready to face the fact that you're about to do this incredible challenge. And, you know, if you get to mile 5 in the marathon and lose your head, I've seen people step off the road where they're like, I can't do it. And I'm like, you know, you've done 5 miles in training easy, you know, but once your head goes, it goes. Just having a look. So Yasmin says she signed up to the Brighton Marathon and I can't really run. Yeah, you got to get your head in the game. And I think it's not about, you know, you're not going to start on day 1 and be able to run a marathon. You don't need to be able to run a marathon on day 1. You just need to do that at the end of your marathon training. So I would focus on milestones. So getting up to 5K, that is a major milestone. If you can get up to 5K and run that comfortably before Christmas or a little bit sooner, if possible, that confidence of running a distance, even if it is a smaller distance, you can replicate that. So when I get to marathon training, it's about getting to that 5K comfortably without having to walk. Then it's working up to the 10K. Then it's doing half marathons, and the best way I think to train for half marathons is to actually run them. So I will have a series of half marathons in my diary ready for them. And then between the half marathon and the full marathon, you've only got a handful of really long runs. So in my training, I would normally do 3 16-mile runs and maybe an 18 or 19-mile run, because I'm not looking for a specific time, I'm just looking to get there. So try not to think of it in its entirety, try and break it up into those milestones and find somebody that's at a similar level to you so that you can have these kind of discussions and kind of support each other, because that will make a big difference. So Kerry says she's very overweight and recently started couch to 5K. And she's doing the 5K Santa Dash in December. Would love to do a marathon someday. Yeah, you know, never say never. You know, I can remember the first time I run 5K without stopping, and it felt enormous. And I often say the most difficult leap in your marathon training is the 0 to 30 minutes of running, you know, because so many people struggle to run consistently, and they walk. And I've got a really good blog post called 10 Reasons Why Fat Runners Walk, and it's provocative, you know, so that people read it. And actually there are a lot of reasons that people walk, and it's not always because they're knackered and you know, it's often because they've lost confidence or they're bored, or, you know, and there are lots of ways of motivating yourself, keeping your brain active. You know, I used to really struggle to be able to run without some kind of audio, because the voices in my head would just drive me nuts. I'd be like, this is hard, this hurts, I'm crap, why am I even bothering? And I could easily talk myself out of a run, and often I would. Like if my headphones went or my battery died on my phone, literally within about 3 minutes I'd be like, right, I'm off home, because I just couldn't cope with the stuff in my head. But there are a lot of techniques for changing that. So stuff around positive affirmations. Often I have post-it notes all around my kind of workspace, because in a similar way I have those thoughts in my business. You know, I have days where I go, oh, I'm crap at this, I'm rubbish, I'm never going to make any money from it. And you can switch those negative thoughts around, you know, with positive affirmations. So often when I run, I'll have something written on the palm of my hand. Often it's, I'm strong, this is easy. And so when it gets really hard, I just keep repeating that in my head, because somehow that seems to work for me. So Clarice, I think is that how you say name? Do you have to change your diet a lot in preparation for long runs? I'm rubbish at food planning. Right, I'm not going to lie to you. If my nutrition was spot on, I probably wouldn't be the size that I am. So, you know, nutrition is not my area of expertise, because of, you know, otherwise I would be slimmer. But I think a good way of thinking about nutrition and running is about thinking about food as fuel. So in the same way you wouldn't put crap into a Formula One car, when you're training for a marathon, you are asking your body to do a lot of stuff that it doesn't normally need to do. So I always say, cram your diet full of really good stuff. And I don't, I'm not getting into that debate of what's good and what's bad. It's not about that. It's more about, what are the nutrients, what are the things that are going to help my body to recover after long runs? So lots of protein, lots of green leafy vegetables, thinking about the, the specific nutrients that you want, thinking about things like turmeric that are anti-inflammatory, and just being really sensible. I mean, there is a real risk when you start running long distances of overcompensating. So you do a race, and I used to do this all the time. You do a race, you think, oh my God, I've just run half a marathon, therefore I can eat cake, I can have a McDonald's, I can, and the excuse to eat all of those foods that are not helping you, but because you feel like, you've burned all these calories, and you are insatiable when you finish one of those races. But, particularly if you are trying to lose weight, it's just very counterproductive. So yes, you do need to change your diet, I think, if you want to make it easier for yourself, but lots of people don't change their diet at all. I do tend to limit my alcohol when I'm training for a big race, because not necessarily because of the impact of the alcohol, but because I don't like running on a hangover. So I'm much more likely to want to wake up fresh to go for a run. So my alcohol consumption goes right the way down when I've got a big race coming up. And I also tend to increase my water intake, and I do try and keep an eye on my snacking, and try and kind of find foods that are going to be better for me snacking, because I do get hungry. So things like protein shakes are really good to make sure that you're not reaching for packs of biscuits or whatever to kind of, for those kind of hunger pangs which you do get. We're just looking if there are any more questions. Doesn't seem to be. So what else could I talk about? Just looking at my notes here. Yeah, I think the thing for me is, as I said earlier on, running has been my life for the last 10 years. I think the blog has been going for since 2010, so it's 7 years old. And before that, I was running before the blog, so about 10 years. But yes, I'm still passionate about running. I'm working on an idea for a new book, which is, I can tell you guys, it's called Only Half Crazy. That's the kind of name I've got in my head at the moment, but I'm kind of looking into whether that's the appropriate name. But it's about half marathons, because actually half marathons are my preferred distance. I've probably done 30 or 40 half marathons in the last 10 years, and I've done them all over the world. So I've done Geneva, Berlin, Paris, Lisbon, Jerusalem, Wales, Paris. I said that, Paris. So yeah, I've done all these kind of exciting half marathons all over the world. And I also think that more so than the marathons, I think the half marathons help to keep me sane, because I have struggled with depression and anxiety and just feelings of being quite low and quite lonely. I mean, I think, loneliness has been a real factor for why I run. Because prior to my running, yes, I had a wide circle of friends, but they were friends that I raved with. They were friends that I drank with, went on holiday with. They weren't people that I could achieve goals with necessarily. And running, I've met so many incredible people in the running world, and I'm part of a traditional running club. I go to socials with them. I can pretty much turn up to any kind of running occasion and make friends with people, because we have this thing in common. And I think it's a lot easier if you are, whatever habit you're trying to kind of give up, whether it's eating, drinking, drugs, whatever it is. I feel like the running community is a really open community who are much more likely to go down the cafe and have a cup of tea after a race than go to the pub for a drink. And even if you do go to the pub for the drink, no one's going to kind of pressurize you into having an alcoholic drink. And I think having that kind of training mentality, people always understand when you go, oh, I'm not going to drink tonight because I've got a race tomorrow. So I think running has helped me to kind of create a network, a support network, basically. So yeah, so running is is a massive part of my life. I can't see it changing anytime soon, but I am also really kind of passionate about helping women to achieve other goals. So unless we have any more questions, I think I'm going to wrap up there. If you want to find out more information about me, you can have a look at my website, which is www.toofat2run.co.uk. It's about to be redesigned. It's been the same for the last 5 years. It's very kind of out of date now. So in the new year, we're kind of coming with a fresh new offer. You can also find more information about me as a motivational speaker and life coach at www.juliecreffield.com, and again, that is another website that is currently in development. I'm really easy to find on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and yeah, I'm happy to kind of answer any questions that you might have. If you're interested in running a marathon, please buy the book or some of my other books that are about kind of different distances. And yeah, say hello on social media. I hope this evening was interesting. I hope I didn't just babble on too much. So yes, thank you for joining me live. Thank you for anybody who sees it on the catch up. And thank you for Laura, who has been an amazing support of what I do at Too Fat to Run. Okay, catch you later. Bye.